So the other day we broke down a ton of details surrounding DMZ and Modern Warfare 4, something that personally speaking, I think I'm most intrigued by out of this year's offering for Call of Duty. I've been a story nerd, I've played multiplayer to death over the years, but DMZ has truly been like a fresh gameplay loop in the past 5 to 10 years for the franchise. Like when all things Warzone have been played out, an entry-level extraction shooter seemed like a logical thing to me with Modern Warfare 2. So to see how they expand upon that, there was a lot to go over objectively, but today I want to talk about how I'm feeling after all of this, and also raising some, I think, valid concerns for what I think still needs to be addressed for the immediate and long-term future of the mode. So drop your thoughts as we go along, drop a like if you enjoy the video, and make sure to subscribe for more DMZ and other Modern Warfare 4, along with other FPS coverage. I'd love to have in the community. Finally, check out my friends over at Advanced GG, where code Espresso can get you 10% off your entire order, but for now, let's get into it. So first, let's talk about my opinions here. What I like about this, I do have to state right up front, this is based off of just what we saw. I didn't get any hands-on, wasn't in LA for the presentation of all of this kind of stuff. And frankly, you've probably seen it here on the channel that the last year or so, we've kind of all but stepped away from Call of Duty for a number of reasons. Burnout, lack of interest, a stale feeling, and I've said it before, all in all, I don't really have any ill will against Black Ops 7 in this year. Hell, I've gone on record plenty of times saying that I loved certain elements, like the Ultra Mastery camo. I asked for that publicly and behind the scenes since Black Ops 4 and the introduction of multiplayer zombies and Blackout Dark Matter camos. So like that and a number of other things I do enjoy and give props to, but for me it was a more refined version of Black Ops 6. And again, not necessarily not a bad thing, it didn't feel that initial spark to want to grind it over again whenever it felt very similar to me. I'm saying this because I want to establish that at this point in my content career and frankly life in general, I'm just playing and posting what I'm having fun with and enjoying and sharing it with you guys. Would I love for that to mean everybody else loves what I'm posting? Absolutely, but I recognize that won't always be the case. So as time goes on, maybe I'm enjoying things now, maybe I don't later. It's all right. That's life. Interests come and go, but now, as for the core of the actual gameplay and what we saw, the game within a game statement that Infinity Ward made, I actually really do see what they're saying here at this. This seems way more in-depth than what we saw with the DMZ beta, and I love that. Personally, I love the idea of progression tracks, traits, the FOB, all that kind of stuff. It does feel like you're playing a completely separate experience compared to just your traditional multiplayer that you may be used to year over year. The progression track and traits, personally, I like a skill track for not only your single operator, but operators, plural. Having the ability to keep that active duty slot to have backups if one run goes south or if you want to change up how you play match over match. I like that idea, and I like the ability you can work towards grinding out and ranking up multiple operators so that once you hit that cap, you can just start right over again and go from there. I think that personally adding this with selectable skills that you can choose consciously, I like that better than what we had in DMZ's beta with the extraction bonuses and the perks you ended up getting. I like that player agency. Looting, for what we've heard so far, honestly, I really like the idea of what we've seen. Having actual crafting, loot logic, I love that kind of stuff. Again, in DMZ, looting was kind of just worthless in most cases, to be honest with you. Like, yeah, you could end up looting things, selling at a buy station for cash, but like, it didn't really task you with doing anything in particular. Interacting with that world, you didn't need to. And honestly, when we talk about things like Arc Raiders recently, the loot logic, that was one of my favorite things. Learning how and where things spawned, both the sort of core items you can end up getting for your everyday use, but also things like in the relation to Modern Warfare 4 and DMZ, recipes. I'm looking forward to seeing those best routes for high tier loot, locations, and a logic for spawns for things like recipes and all that kind of stuff. So looking forward to that. The living world with dynamic weather and these sort of AI adjustments, I like the sound of this as well. Dynamic weather, I think, is just, I mean, it's probably a stupid point to love, but I do love dynamic weather in games. It just makes each run feel different, which I think is cool. You don't get as bored per se because like subconsciously it does feel different run over run. Maybe that's just me. Having a proper system to showcase if you are stealth or not, and then having AI that scales with how much you interact with those AI, I think is pretty cool. Having the ways to mitigate that a little bit with suppressors on your weapons, I like that that's fleshed out. And like so far, truly, most of what we've seen, I really do enjoy the sound of. Of course, I won't know for sure if it actually plays as good as I am hoping it will until I get hands-on, and that's the same thing that goes for anybody here at this. Obviously, I've said it for years, if you are optimistic about this, I think it's fair to be cautiously optimistic. I was not a fan of Modern Warfare 2, so while I like the sound of everything here, I don't want to just blindly put faith in this. So we'll see what we learn in time and how it feels once we actually get hands-on, but ultimately, I do think that what we have with DMZ here could be the best chances we see Call of Duty has to get into that sort of entry-level extraction shooter niche once again. You're always going to have those things that are more hardcore, Tarkov, Hunt, so on and so on, but to me, this is one of those things that can truly act as like a big mainstream introduction here that Call of Duty, I've said it before, they're the McDonald's of FPS games. Easily digestible, they're everywhere, everybody can find something that they just can pick up and try. It's not the 5-star course cuisine that you expect from something that's more refined or anything like that, but it's accessible to everyone. And for that, I enjoy the prospect of this being something that introduces more players to an extraction shooter, that they can go down that rabbit hole a little more if they'd like to. So with the depth and complexity of what we've seen so far, I think that's a better reference point for the extraction genre than what we saw in the DMZ beta. And for that, I do like it. However, there are things that we should note are of concern. Things that I do think that do need to be properly addressed with what we have for DMZ. Some of these just personal concerns, others being like systemic issues that could arise here with DMZ. Firstly, one of the big things right up front though that is honestly hit or miss. I mean, if you're gonna play this, you're probably already going to be like, hey, I'm gonna buy this. But from the perspective of a new prospective player, a $70 price tag for a third mode exclusive here is definitely something that is a little pricey. Comparably, we've seen the most recent introductions in the air quote AAA space for extraction shooters being Arc Raiders and Marathon, both of those being only $40, which personally speaking, I think is a justifiable price tag. I know that I've personally gotten hundreds of hours of playtime out of a $40 game, which to me, that value proposition has more than gotten its money's worth. So if you're somebody that's just interested in what DMZ may have on offer as a new player, do you spend that $70 for a campaign and a multiplayer that you may or may not interact with and kind of just front that? I think that might be something that turns off prospective players a little bit here, but also, as we'll touch on in a second, I mean, there could be adverse side effects that could be good, as in maybe deterring cheaters a little bit, but again, we'll get there in a second. The next thing that could be a concern is some content cadence. The DMZ beta was a byproduct of a seeming test and kind of an afterthought, it seemed like, but can they keep meaningful updates for DMZ coming throughout the year? If they are going to make this a mainstream thing, at the very least, it is something that's going to have to keep up somewhat with that content cadence that we see seasonally. DMZ 1 had some decent updates, but altogether didn't get a whole ton by comparison to the other modes or even other extraction shooters in the genre. Building 21 was shortly after the launch of the game, Koshi Complex was added in Season 3, and Season 4 introduced a massive UI and system overhaul that you could have thought like that was the start of like the real investment into the game. Personally speaking, when they added that overhaul in, I was like, oh, now we're cooking. We're going somewhere with this. But then DMZ didn't get a single meaningful update for the rest of the year following that. The only thing notable update-wise was the inclusion of the haunting event items in Season 6, also coming to DMZ. That just because it was probably included in Nighttime Al Mazrah. So here's the thing, if they're serious about this, how do you keep making meaningful additions and moves to the game, keeping the gameplay loop fresh for players month over month? Perhaps week over week if you really want to micromanage stuff like that. Like, what do you do to keep that loop enticing while adding things more like bosses, maps, puzzles, and so on? So that's something that they seem like right now from prior interviews that they've given, that they know that's what they're going to have to tackle and it's going to be a big hurdle, but they, fingers crossed, have that under control, but we'll have to wait and see. And that kind of brings me to the next point here, maybe like a sub point, but an endgame loop. Extraction shooters are inherently grindy, right? Most extraction players I've seen, talk to, or personally know will easily sink 100, 200, 300 plus hours into a mode or game in particular, which is kind of wild for a focused amount of play on a singular game, if you really think about it. They'll do this though and then burn themselves out because either they've played so much or because there's really just not much more to do after that point. Arc Raiders is a great example of this right now. Minus the anti-cheat issues, the duplication glitches that we've seen recently, the current core of the game is still great, but for those that have been playing a ton since launch, you're going to do the quest for a 5th time, rank up to level 75 for a 5th time in the same rewards, upgrade your benches the exact same way for a 5th time, find your blueprints in the same type of containers for the 5th time, and things like that following next month's expedition. So like, once you do that for so long, I mean, what else is there to do? PvP, PvE, sure, like you can change up your gameplay style and get a bit more of a engagement out of that, but altogether, what is the game offering you to keep that loop enticing? It doesn't even have to be something like new content, though of course that's always welcomed and nice, but it is something that I think extraction shooters are really hard to nail down that end game sometimes, where to have a system in place that continually will keep the sort of wheel going for the mouse that is us playing the game, how do you do that makes it enticing? They have said that they have long-term grinds, challenges that are akin to things like the Serpentine camo that we had for DMZ's beta. That was a very convoluted grind to go for, but a grind no less. But is that the only end game you're going to think about? Is there something that is this big bad boss that you're going to eventually need to put like a month's time into before you can end up doing? We don't know. So that's definitely something that's going to be a hurdle. Otherwise, you're probably going to have the same issues that a lot of other games are having in the genre currently. Frequency of wipes is also something that I think is something we should be considering, or at least talking about, because wipes are kind of inherently a part of extraction shooters. Otherwise, you just reach a certain point where it's like, okay, I'm done. I have literally everything. The frequency at which we could and I think should see these is still up in the air, but it's something that needs that to be communicated. If you guys remember, DMZ 1.0 had, I think, 1 or maybe 2 of these, but the first one at least was not communicated pre-wipe up until about a week before. Whenever they debuted that, hey, a new season's coming, oh, we're gonna wipe all your stuff. And I think that this was something that was only the missions and things like that. Like, I don't recall if this ended up taking away your contraband or whatever, but either way, there was a ton of outrage there when the mention of a wipe in Season 2 start came, because people just felt blindsided, especially if they had never really played an extraction shooter before, which again, DMZ was likely an entry point for a lot of players. So with how much we kind of see modeled after Arc Raiders and its success recently, I wouldn't be surprised, especially given that they have an optional style prestige track for multiplayer, if this is also something that we see an optional track to reset and wipe within DMZ. Wipe for some sort of extra bonuses, don't wipe if you don't want to, that you keep all your stuff. I think that that might be a nice way to take that. I know that it's kind of the antithesis of like the hardcore extraction shooter, but again, if you're trying to be welcoming to the general masses here, it might not be the worst thing to kind of cut a quarter on. Personally speaking, I think one of my biggest concerns that I would love to hear more about is post-year 1 support though, because I think this is perhaps the biggest question mark about DMZ, given that it's a third mode here with Modern Warfare 4, that it's not a part of Warzone and the free-to-play element of the game. We have not seen the long-term support of a third game mode besides Zombies Chronicles back with Black Ops 3, releasing after the post-launch year of the following game in the franchise, so DMZ kind of runs that risk of being a one and done just by the sheer nature of being tethered to Modern Warfare 4. Now, of course, things like Warzone could be something that you can point towards to be like, oh, that was initially planned to be only within Modern Warfare 2019, but then they made it a free-to-play and long-standing thing. But like, not free-to-play, third mode rather than like what we would have seen there as a fourth extra mode, I guess. It's a just whole different scenario that I think is really interesting. I think that the one thing DMZ's beta had going for it was tethered to Warzone, so you could have those consistent updates and keep it up year over year. But will there be that type of investment from Infinity Ward when they're talking about the depth, this game within a game, that if they're tasked with working on their next project after this year, what happens to DMZ? Like, does a dedicated DMZ team take over? Do they hand that off to another studio? Will it be something that goes standalone after year 1 and perhaps is on sale for $40 after the fact, supported by the team of devs that we may have surrounding this? I mean, it wouldn't be the first time we've seen a cheaper than market entry level price point. Modern Warfare Remastered eventually was sold for less than a full game and a standalone, but for a third mode to do that, I mean, that'd be kind of unprecedented. And at that point, I think it'd be fair for any Zombies fan to be like, well, wait, why didn't we do that with Zombies at any point during the franchise? So that's something that you definitely need to consider and think about as the long-term nature of this. And then finally, the last thing is, of course, one of the biggest things we've seen in the Call of Duty franchise for years now is cheating. Obviously, cheating is a massive problem. It was a massive problem in DMZ's beta, and it was something that pointed out the flaws of having a not so great anti-cheat in a permadeath game mode. You lost your stuff, you could have died to cheaters, and there was really no ultimately repercussions. Now, of course, there are games out there that do give your loot back. Arc Raiders, just because I come from that game and playing so much, does this, where if you end up dying to a cheater, that cheater's banned, you end up getting your stuff back from that interaction that you had with them. So that would be a way to mitigate that, but inherently, how bad is the cheating problem going to be? I said at the beginning of these sort of concerns for the game mode that maybe the $70 price tag might be something that deters cheaters to some degree. Obviously, we still see cheaters within like multiplayer ranked play and stuff like that. Like there's going to be cheaters, but if it's not something that a player can just simply spoof something for their hardware IDs or something like that, and then just create a new account and jump on and start cheating again, I mean, yeah, there might be things like with Steam family sharing that you can probably get around because we saw that happen with Ark, but like $70 to end up cheating and trying to ruin somebody else's day. Listen, I'm not a loser that cheats, but if I were, I wouldn't want to pay $70 every single time to do that. Trolling just simply isn't worth all that kind of money. So will that be a natural barrier? Perhaps, but of course, the anti-cheat and Ricochet definitely needs to be in a better state. That's something we can basically say at any given moment for Call of Duty and the franchise as a whole. But ultimately, I do remain cautiously optimistic. Again, the biggest reason I'm interested in this is because it's the first major deviation, something new Call of Duty has done in years. And I say that while knowing, yes, they took a stab at the core experience with DMZ, but it's at least hard enough a deviation from what we've seen the past few years across all titles in the last 5 to 6 years or so that I'm certainly intrigued. And being that, personally speaking, I'm in a huge kick of my own for extraction shooters at the moment, enjoying them. I do enjoy the sound of this. It's just I do have some concerns for how this can be better that I'd like to see answered sooner rather than later, but like in time at any point. But anyways, that's where we're gonna wrap it up. Now, before we do, a quick heads up, we have partnered with my friends over at Advanced GG. Again, as we've mentioned, a bit under the radar the last few months, but now going into the summer, ramping that up more and more. Advanced is the healthier energy supplement option where I use it daily as my comparable cup of coffee. Currently drinking that raspberry lemonade. Magic Rainbow Sherbet's also another one that's one of my favorites, but I'd highly recommend, and we actually co-branded that along with a few other items on their site, like a 26-ounce ice shaker. But love this stuff. If you're looking for a replacement for your own cup of coffee, give it a try. If you decide to give it a go, code Espresso and get 10% off your entire order. But no sweat, appreciate you hearing me out on this. And of course, just checking in on the videos here that you made it this far. But anyways, that's what we're going to call it. So thanks so much for watching. Drop your thoughts down below. Drop a like if you guys enjoyed the video. And make sure to subscribe for more DMZ and Modern Warfare 4 coverage. I'd love to have in the community. But for now, thanks so much for watching. My name has been Espresso. I'll see you later. Take care and peace.